the Agile brand. Hey there, it's your pal, Bonnie Habian, and welcome to the Worth Knowing podcast. If you like a real-life story that features grit, grace, and a whole lot of gumption, then you're in the right place. Get ready to hear from some courageous women who talk about how pivotal, teachable, aha moments have reshaped their confidence and delivered opportunities they never imagined. It didn't happen by chance, of course. They figured out new, sometimes uncomfortable ways to put themselves out there in a way that shouts, they get it. You'll hear intimate stories with actionable takeaways and some very secret sauce. Because everyone has an important story worth knowing. And you know what? The world needs it, and you deserve it. Rashmi Airan's journey from an Ivy League educated lawyer to a convicted felon and now a celebrated motivational speaker is a real testament to the power of resilience. Her story offers real and raw life lessons for professionals and entrepreneurs. As a first-generation immigrant who achieved early success before facing a life-altering setback, Rashmi's experiences provide a unique perspective on leadership, decision-making, and, quite frankly, the importance of maintaining ethical integrity in the face of pressure. From hitting rock bottom to now sharing her experience across the world as a keynote speaker, today we'll explore her insights on overcoming adversity, embracing vulnerability, and fostering an accountability atmosphere in both business and life. And Rashmi, I am so happy to have you. I have been looking so forward to having you on, and I want to start by saying this. I have been really kind of intrigued by your story. And so when I've shared it with other people, some of my friends, the first thing they say to me is props to her because she's owned it. And now she's done what she had to do and she's come back and she's reinventing herself for a new normal. And so I wanted to start that out because I think the story you share is definitely one that piques interest for a lot of reasons. But I think it also really gives inspiration to others who may have been through something life-altering and maybe didn't come back as strong, maybe are still coming back, maybe are afraid. So I just wanted to kind of preface it with that and thank you for coming on and sharing some of your story.
Oh, thank you so much, Bonnie. I'm honored to be here with you. And you know, it's funny because I do hear that a lot. And it's definitely been a journey for me. It wasn't something that was automatic. You know, I think the idea of accountability, which I'm sure we'll get into, is something that we have to be intentional about. And it was a process.
Yeah. So before we go into the story a little bit, tell me about your history. I know that, your dad came over apparently with $8 in his pocket. He was a very highly educated, law school, a bachelor's degree, I think a master's or two. Really dedicated to education. I think that story is important because the research I've done and have spoken to you a little bit, the whole education thing and kind of what you're going to be growing up was a very big, important element in your childhood. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think that it's not just my family. I would say largely most immigrant families that came over from whatever country, there was a huge, of course, huge population that came from India, but other countries as well. There was so much intent upon trying to achieve the American dream. And, people like my parents sacrificed everything to come here, right? Like leaving everything and everybody and all the comforts of what they had in India, which was way more than what they had when they came here. And as you mentioned, dad came with $8 in his pocket to get educated, to make a life for himself and hopefully a family. And when he went back and married my mom, they had an arranged marriage, which is a whole other
Oh
story.
gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, and side note, this year they'll celebrate 55 years married.
Wonderful.
They're so in love. It's an amazing story. And so when they came here, there was no there wasn't even an inkling in their mind that they're not going to succeed, right? Like there was always this work ethic and drive and persistence and determination to do whatever it takes. And that starts with education. So, certainly in India, education is a very big thing. And so by the time my parents came here, dad he had already graduated from IIT, which is like the equivalent of MIT in India, came here first to Carolina at UNC and got his master's in public health. Then when he went back and married my mom, then when they came, by the time my mom came, she was 18 and already had a master's degree in economics
Now, your mother had a master's degree at 18 in
at
economics.
18. So when they get married, now they both have master's degrees. They start then at NC State, and my dad went into a PhD program in civil environmental engineering, and my mom got another master's degree in economics here. So a little, I don't know the difference in the actual economics degrees, but there was a little difference. Then they moved down to Miami, and dad was working. But eventually, down the road, both of them got law degrees. Both of them got master's in law degrees. So education has always been something that is certainly a value. It's a core value, I think, just of our culture and of our family to keep learning and growing and educating ourselves. I tell my kids learn something new every day.
Oh, best advice ever. Best advice ever.
Thank you. And so but I will say that so when I was growing up, that it was never a question like, am I going to go to college? It's what college am I going to go to? And growing up in this, in an Indian culture, immigrant culture with high achieving parents, and I am absolutely a type A overachiever.
Really? I didn't really catch that.
Maybe. And so I was so driven to achieve, looking back on those young years, right, like teenage 20s, all of my self-worth and self-value and self-love, and why I believed others loved me and believed in me was rooted in my achievements. So didn't even know that I couldn't have even put a words to that then because I didn't understand that about myself. But certainly everything I did was driven towards making my parents proud of me, having people love me. I thought people loved me because of my achievements. And so that was my identity. My identity was, what school am I going to? What awards did I win? How much money am I going to make? All the societal definitions of success. I'm not the only person that's ever experienced this. I think this is a very common story. And so when I finally had the opportunity to essentially kind of start my own practice, after law school here, and I'll give a little history to your listeners. I graduated high school, went on to UNC Chapel Hill.
What was your degree there?
At UNC, I had I majored in communications,
Oh,
which
okay.
was speech communication, but with a emphasis on rhetoric
Okay.
and then rhetorical analysis. And then I minored in business administration. I then went to Wall Street and I worked for a few years on Wall Street as an investment banker. And then I went to law school in New York at Columbia Law School. And also, like, both kind of all educational journeys of mine, I always, kind of graduated top of my class. And I don't say that in any way to be arrogant or boastful. I think it's an important part of the story, given what happened later. So by all accounts, I was on this like path to success, whatever that means. And I thought, great, like, I have made it. This is the goal and I've achieved the goal. And so everything will be hunky dory. I'll share a little bit, I'll backtrack a little bit about my background. When I was in high school, well, when I was a little girl, my parents used to tell me about my grandfather. And my grandfather on my dad's side was a freedom fighter with Gandhi against the British. And so I would hear all these stories about his struggles and the fight and the revolution. And then, of course, India gains independence. By this point, he had gotten very ill because actually the day my dad was born, he was sitting in jail during
Oh
this
gosh.
this movement, with Gandhi. And so he had gotten so ill from being in these British jails for so long, so many times. So he, like, he was suffering. My dad didn't know from one day to the next if his dad was going to survive. The economy is in chaos because India's now gotten its independence, but there's so much unknown. They didn't know if the business was going to survive, their family business. And so dad grows up in this world of total uncertainty. Eventually his father passes. And, now my dad comes at 23 or, 20, whatever, moves to America with my mom at 23. And again, they've immigrated, they've left everything, total uncertainty with nothing, and they make it. So when I was like in sixth grade, we moved into like the premier neighborhood in Miami.
And that was not a very long amount of time. They make it. They came over here educated, so I assume that helped. But still, you were really starting from scratch. Nothing.
So from 1970 to 1980, I think we moved into that house in 1983. So yeah, it was really pretty quick that they worked really, really hard and did well. And we moved into this incredible home on the ocean. And I would say I definitely led a, like a privileged childhood. And I was very spoiled. I remember, like, we used to host lots of parties, and then between 1986 and 89, there was a huge crash in the real estate market. My parents were
Yes.
very, very heavily involved in real estate. They had LLPs and private placements and syndications, and everything fell apart. They lost everything.
Your
So
family lost everything.
my parents lost everything. So between 86 and 89, they lost a $40 million portfolio
Oh
in
my
86.
gosh. So, okay. So
Like,
this is
you can imagine the
insane.
equivalent of today, what that is today, right? But $40 million in 1986 was a crop load more now.
Yeah, you're never having to work. Your kids are never having to work. Your kids never
Yeah.
have to
I mean,
work.
it was
I
all in
get it.
assets, right? It was all real estate, but they lost it all. They had to file bankruptcy. They lost the home to foreclosure. And I was a senior in high school. So I had watched my parents now essentially struggle. And, I watched them carry like their personal favorite photographs and jewelry and into this small 1,000 square foot rental near my high school. And my dad would cry in
Oh,
the
that's
bathroom
terrible.
and hide from us because he didn't want us to know. Like, I only learned that he used to cry years later when I became an adult. So it was that, like, watching my parents go through this fall and yet still have faith in each other, have faith in God, honor us as kids with the truth, and never ever lose faith in, like, themselves, that they always had this positive mindset and attitude.
So you saw that, and that kind of, in some respects, must have sat somewhere back in your mind.
100%. So I would say that as a kid, watching, like, when I was a senior in high school, watching my parents go through this, there was something in me that triggered, like, I just have to work really, really, really hard in
I get it.
schools
I get it.
to do all the right things and be the best little girl I can be so that I can achieve this success so I don't have to struggle.
Yeah, you never want to go through that ever.
I don't ever want to go through what I've watched my parents go through and what I heard about what my grandparents went through. So when I finally get to Columbia Law School and I graduate and I get this great job in California, and then I move to Miami and I get this great job, and I'm working so hard to avoid the fact that I don't want to be in a struggle, right? And I was pounding the pavement. Eventually, I start my own practice, and I'm my husband at the time was a firefighter, so I'm the major breadwinner, and I'm pounding the pavement and going to every possible networking event and every, opportunity I could try to sell my services. I was a real estate attorney.
Right. That's what type of, explain to folks. Not everybody is really familiar with real estate and what's involved in a process, but you're an attorney for closing, I imagine closing certain deals.
Correct. So I was representing buyers who were trying to buy property, so I would do their closing. I was representing sellers who were trying to sell their property, and I would do their closing documents. I was working with a lot of banks that were giving commercial loans that were either capitalized by real estate or by capital markets or by accounts receivables, and I would do all those documents for banks for those real estate loans,
So residential and commercial, you're doing both.
residential and
Okay.
commercial. Yes.
This is your before and after story. Instead of imagining a rewarding career in medical imaging, Southeastern College can actually take you there. Prepare for a career in ultrasound, radiology, and X-ray technology. With hands-on specialized training, simulations, and real-life experience with the latest imaging technology, you'll be ready to play a vital role on any healthcare team. Transform your life by helping others. Southeastern College. Your future is bright. Visit scc.edu to get started.
Okay. So you start, I read a little bit, you start to build this thriving practice, couple of years, it's starting to go, but we've all been in this situation where one of the big people or someone that's, kind of you look up to comes into you for their services to help support them, for their real estate transactions. And of course, you're thinking, I guess I made it. I'm doing really well. Look at him, or whomever, her, whatever it was, a developer coming to me. Kind of take me through that process right in that time period.
So it was 2007, a couple years after I had started my practice in 2004. My kids were 2 and 3. sorry, no, at the time, then there were 7 and 8.
Okay.
And by this point, my marriage is falling, like, I'm having marriage issues because I'm working all the time and I'm hustling, and I'm missing dinners, and it was not, I wasn't in a good place. And so I run into an old colleague of mine who used to be on the other side of cases from a prior job. And so I run into her at a restaurant, and she says, "Oh, hey, I didn't realize you were doing real estate. I know a developer who's looking for a new attorney." And I was like, in my mind, a light bulb goes off like, oh my gosh, if I can get one developer to like hire me, that would mean volume business, which means financial stability, which means more time with my kids. So it's not even a question. Like in my mind, I'm like, I have to get this client. I was so hungry for the client. So I go, within a day or two to go meet the developer, and I go into, it was North Miami Beach. So I go to this building, I walk into the conference room, and the developer himself, like the money guy, the principal guy, was sitting in a separate office, but his two right-hand guys were sitting there with me, sitting there to meet with me, his operations guys. And basically they said, "Rashmi, this is what we've been doing. We've been working with a big law firm, but we really just want to have one lawyer and work with somebody directly. So we'd like to work with you." So the first thing is that should have been a massive red flag, because why would they leave a big law firm that has more capacity, more experience, more education, more bandwidth, all of that, to come and work with me, who I've never worked with a developer before, right? So that should have been a massive red flag. And I was so blind to it because I just wanted this client so badly. And I was like, instead, just really flattered and arrogant. And then they began to describe the transactions that they were doing. And they said, "Well, we've been doing these creative transactions. We've been giving buyers incentives to buy their units, condo, because the seller had condo conversions, so units that he was selling." And so they said, "This is how we do it. It's through this like one instrument. It's documented, and you'll send the money to our management company." So I was like, "Huh, okay, well, that's kind of creative." So I walked into a side office and called my underwriting counsel for my underwriter. And I said, "I'm sitting with this developer. He's doing third party disbursements on the HUD." Because in my mind, I was like, well, I'm doing a third party disbursement to a management company. How would I structure the transaction? So they said, "Well, as long as you go do A, B, C, D, E, your files will be clean." Now, when I look back on that moment, I realize I left out a very important fact,
Yeah.
which is that the buyer was getting a financial benefit through this rental guarantee, buyer incentive. And at the time, I guess I realized how I so immediately rationalized and justified what I was doing, and assumed that that didn't matter. All that mattered was my escrows in and out. And as long as my escrow account indicated exactly what the settlement statement indicated, that's all I have to do. So within 2 weeks, I had my first closing request. I didn't do any due diligence. I didn't ask for help. By the way, I am surrounded by attorneys. Like there is any number of people, not just my parents, but like my friends, my mentors, that I could have gone to say, "Hey, I'm working with this developer. He wants to do XYZ. What do you think?"
Well, this is something I picked up on in one of your articles that I read, and I think this is a really important point for anyone who is a solopreneur or by themselves. You mentioned like when you're in a bigger office, when you're in Wall Street, you have people to bounce things off of. You can go down a hall,
Right.
ask this person, ask that person. When you're a solopreneur, you don't have that, right? So you
Yeah.
may not be inclined to be able to ask someone that's an apple to apple scenario. This is what I'm doing, and they have the expertise to answer it right away. You kind of have
Right.
to, a little bit on your own, a little bit maybe you don't feel like, you don't want to show that you don't know what you're doing. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying that it's a little bit of an emptier silo, right?
Well, I definitely think when you have your own business, whether it's solopreneur, or even an entrepreneur with more people maybe around you. In my case, I was a solopreneur, but I had 4 people that worked for me, but
Right.
they were, they were hourly employees. So technically I really was a solopreneur. And when you're operating in that kind of silo, as you said, there is no checks and balances. There's nobody that contextually understands what I'm going through
No.
to even ask for help or ask for them to review something. But I think it's incumbent upon us as solopreneurs, though, to find mentors and build those relationships with people, both in and out of our workplaces, right? In our workplace situations, right? Like in my case, as a solopreneur, I did have other friends and mentors that were attorneys in the real estate space that absolutely I could have gone to. And of course, afterwards, I've had many conversations with them and they wish that I would have gone to them and asked them for help or a second opinion. I also didn't want to ask for help because, again, right, that's a sign of weakness.
Yeah, I get it, right? And you were younger at the time too. I mean, right? There's a lot of things you can look at.
And I was aggressive and I was like, oh, I'm just a strategic, out of the box thinker. I'm doing things that are very creative.
Right,
And so
right.
right. And so I just didn't ask the questions of others, of the developer. I just, in hindsight, I realized I was not asking the questions because I didn't want to hear the answers.
Yeah.
I just wanted to keep the client because that was giving me financial stability.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you go through, you're working with this particular developer, and then at some point, did you return? Did your practice continue, or you stopped doing work with that person? Right. I guess the
Yeah. I worked about 15 months with this developer. The units all sold, and then I stopped working with him. And I actually stopped doing transactional work altogether. I merged my practice with my father's, who was doing real estate litigation and like foreclosure type of work.
right.
And so I merged my practice with him, and then I just started growing our practice. I mean, I scaled our business 1200% within like 2 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I was doing a different type of growth of a business, but focused on litigation and other things.
So things are going well. You're living your life. Your children are now at what age? 7,
So
8,
now my kids, yeah, at this point they were in 2011, they were 5 and 6, and the FBI knocks on my door.
and you have no idea. Like, do you even know that they're FBI? Like, hello? I mean,
I was completely oblivious. FBI shows up, two agents show their badges at my office, and like any normal person, I freaked out
yeah.
and was scared, and I thought, oh my God, the FBI's here. But I also didn't believe I had done anything wrong. So I
Right.
thought, well, I have to talk to the FBI, because if I don't talk to the FBI, then they'll definitely think I did something wrong. Like, that
Another
was like my
thing that
mentality.
people need to learn, correct?
Yes, because what I have learned since is that actually you can say to the FBI, can I please take your card and I'll call you back when I have my attorney with
Right.
me, right? Because you have the right to have an attorney with you if you're talking to the FBI, but I didn't know that.
No,
And everyone's like, how could you not have known that? I'm like, I don't
I wouldn't
watch
have known that. I watch TV and I never, I wouldn't know
I,
that either.
I don't even watch criminal law shows. I have no idea. And so I always tell people in my audiences, I'm like, well, now you know. Hopefully none of you will ever be in this situation. But if the FBI ever comes, you don't have to talk to them without an attorney. So they grilled me for 4 hours, and I used to have a circular table near my desk in my office, and they sat there and they showed me pictures and emails and documents,
Oh,
and I'm answering these questions like, they say, did you ever see this person? Did you ever open this email? Did you read this attachment?
yeah,
And I would be like, yes, no, yes, no. And
right.
this is 4 years,
Right. I'm
right?
saying, yeah, I
Lectures.
wouldn't remember
No
a
one
lot of that.
remembers.
I guess maybe not. Yeah.
But I was so naive, and like I definitely didn't understand the reach of the federal government and the power and the need to be really sure of what I'm saying. I just kind of was being, again, very arrogant and flippant because I didn't think I had done anything wrong.
Okay.
So then they leave. Now 2 more years go by. So now my kids are 7 and 8.
So they come into, I didn't realize that there's a big gap between when they come to you and when they
Yes.
return.
Yes.
And in those 2 years, you have no idea what's
I have
going on.
no idea. They don't return. I get a grand jury subpoena for documents
Okay.
from a U.S. attorney. And that's the point that I start like freaking out,
Yeah.
thinking, but I'm still sort of holding it down. I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm just a records custodian. They wanted the subpoena said they wanted all of my files with this developer. So I'm like, okay. So I had all the files scanned. So I submit them to my attorney. So I, at this point, then go to an attorney,
Oh, it
who,
costs tremendous amount. I mean, a lot
yeah.
of money.
And I'm lucky because I have relationships with attorneys. So this was like a mentor of mine.
Okay.
Beginning during the investigation phase, I hired one of the former U.S. attorneys. Well, he was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, very well known. He like worked the Elian Gonzalez case. Like, he's a very well known attorney, and he had offered me a job years ago that I never took, and so, but he's mentored me for years, and I called him up, and so he like was managing it for me. And about 3 months later, he calls me into his office and he said, Rashmi, you need to sit down on my couch and we need to have a conversation. So, okay. And he basically said, you're a target. I had no idea what that meant because, again, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I don't know what this stuff means. And then he explained to me that they're coming after me.
Yeah.
I remember just like collapsing and uncontrollably shaking
Yeah, no, absolutely.
because this was my whole life.
I know.
This was everything I had worked so hard for. And all I was thinking about was like, I'm disgracing my parents, I'm disgracing my children, I'm disgracing my community. I sit on a lot of boards in Miami. So I'm like, oh my God, the nonprofits that I work with are going to be affected. Like I was so distraught over what this meant and felt like I was walking through a twilight zone. Like it did not feel real.
Well, especially you're the good girl, right? I mean, I think we
Exactly.
can all relate to that. We're the good girl. We try and help everyone. We please
Yeah.
everyone. We want everyone to be good. We
I
want to take care of
volunteer. I'm a
everybody.
good mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was so like just terrified. And I kept thinking, like, maybe I'll be able to avoid the indictment. Like, I thought, I'm going to prove to this attorney,
Right.
US attorney, that I didn't do anything wrong. But, the attorney kept saying to my attorney, she's still, Russian still has time. We just want to talk to her. Can you have her come in and talk to us? And my response was like, I don't know anything. I didn't do anything. What am I going to say?
Yeah.
So,
What are you going to say? Yeah. Like,
so I got indicted in April of 2014. And they indicted me with 1 count of conspiracy to commit bank fraud and 24 counts of bank fraud.
and they said conspiracy. So they're saying that you
Conspired
conspired.
with
Okay.
the developer.
Got it.
Which, by the way, that's the most damning count that a U.S. attorney can come after you with, and I'll explain to you why in a little bit. So I then hired another attorney, who's like a close friend of mine, who's like I think the best criminal defense attorney, because the first attorney, who's very well known, said you will definitely need me as a character witness later on. Let me be your character witness. You should hire a different attorney. So then I went and hired my friend David, who I've known for 20 years. We both taught at UN Law School together. His wife and I went to college together. Like I've known him. We're friends. He lives a mile away, right? Like we're very, very close. We were very close. It's hard to go through a case and then stay that close. I mean, we're friends still, but not the same. So then I tried really hard to convince and find that piece of evidence that would prove that I'm innocent. Because I was like, I'm going to prove that I'm innocent. I'm going to go through every single document in this discovery, which was like 200,000 pages, of documents and 15,000 emails. And I'm like, I'm going to prove that I'm innocent. And so, and then every few weeks, so I would go through every single document.
Yeah. You spent an enormous amount of time just trying to figure out and solve your own. Like you're going to go through and try and solve it.
Right. Like I'm going to be my own attorney and figure it out. Pretty like within 4 months, my attorney said, can you come in with your parents? And I went in and he starts going through like, Rashmi, if we go to trial, this is what's going to happen, and this is the evidence the government's going to use. And this is the evidence we're going to use. And he basically said, Rashmi, if you go to trial, you're going to lose. Like I can tell you like 90% you're going to lose. And there's like no appeal, right? You're looking at 20 years. You're going to miss your kid's whole life.
Yeah.
Like all of it. And so, I remember that meeting, my dad left like 6 times to go to the bathroom, right? And he would come back with his eyes just a little redder, right? Like it was so hard. And, my attorney, who's a close friend, said, Rashmi, I know you. You did not walk into this planning a crime.
Yeah.
I get that. But here's the thing. As an attorney, you had a fiduciary duty to do more. You should have asked the questions that you didn't ask. And not doing something is still doing something wrong. Right? And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, he's right. And what had happened was over the 4 months of me going through all these documents, I learned that this developer and his people were doing a lot of things outside of the closing, outside of my file, that I did not know about. And that's what gave rise to the whole case, right? Because there were some really bad things. Like they were paying the buyers after the closing, and they were sending the money to the buyers to bring in for the actual cash to close, for the transaction. But see, even though I didn't know any of that, what I did know, which was there was this buyer incentive, that was enough. And the reason why the conspiracy count is so important is that on a conspiracy count, all the government has to prove is that the defendant knew one detail. There can be 500 million that I didn't know, but I knew this one detail, and that's enough. Right. And so, it's really hard to imagine, right? But my attorney said, Rashmi, your name is on every document, every email, every check, every settlement statement. There's no jury that'll say you didn't at least know one detail. And the truth is I did know, right? Like I did
Right.
know there was this buyer incentive. I didn't know, even though I didn't know the other things, it's enough that I knew this one thing that I should have gone to the developer or his agents and asked more questions. At a minimum, walked away.
I have so much to talk to you about, Rashmi, and we are going to do just that when we pick up our conversation in part 2 of our interview. We'll chat about Rashmi's journey from inside the prison walls to now sharing her story on stages across the country while teaching about the power of transformation. So get ready for part 2 of my interview with Rashmi Airan. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Worth Knowing. If you'd like to learn more about our guest story or connect with them, you'll find their details in the show notes. Remember, the path to worth knowing is paved with courage and insight. Stay inspired, keep striving, and continue to make a difference. Then, you must make sure to share it with others. Until next time, keep chasing those aha moments, my friends. You know, the ones that deliver results and motivate and teach the world. Worth Knowing is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. The Agile Brand.